So first of all, thank you very much for coming along. My intention for this session from my side is to give you a model of a complete sort of administration of the matrix from beginning to hopefully end if we have the time. I will say that 1 hour is a stretch, and I've actually cleared a bit of time beyond the hour. I've got an extra half hour so that if it went over, I would be able to stay on for those of you that can manage it. But I also appreciate that some of you may not be able to. And the session will be recorded as we've just been discussing. So you could pick up that last bit if we really need it, if we do need to go over, but we'll see how we go. Generally speaking, I like to leave at least 90 minutes for a collective matrix to give ourselves space to dive in, but I was very conscious that this was short notice, and so I'm shooting for an hour to see if we can do something really useful in that time. From your side, I'm imagining this model will give you, it's just one model of how this can be done, okay? It's not the right way or the only way by a long shot, and you may well have sort of occurrings to you throughout the process where you think, I'd do that a bit differently, and that's great. But I've noticed when I learn something new, it's really helpful to see a few models of people doing it. And I was very conscious, particularly for the new people in this class, that because there's so many people that have done it before, there's a way we've kind of started a little further down the track than we normally would. And for those of you that are new, it's kind of like, oh, I haven't actually demonstrated, I haven't done my demonstration of how I do the matrix. So that's the function of this time together. Does that sound like what you were expecting? So it's pretty much going to be running a matrix right through the whole thing. So yeah, are we, anyone here thinking, oh, I thought this was going to be something different? Okay, great. Well, the next thing I want to do is just basically take a moment to check in with each other. So the way I think we might do that, we might just do a quick check in with ourselves, first of all. So I just invite you to take a moment to put down anything, any pens or keyboards. And if you like, you could close your eyes. Just taking a moment to just let yourself settle into awareness of what it's like to be here now, breathing. As best you can, just allowing yourself to open to whatever the experience of now is for you. Might be awareness of the body, the breath, feel of the air on your skin, the clothing. There might be thinking. There might be sensing sounds, smells, tastes. Even seeing behind the eyelids. Whatever's present, just letting yourself settle into an awareness of what's present. And perhaps giving particular attention to the body, the feeling, the sensation, sense, as it were. You might let yourself in this space, connect with what matters to you about being here. Just holding that open, loving question, letting it settle on your heart mind, not so much as a problem to be solved, but as a object for contemplation, to be appreciated. And at the same time as you might be noticing that, you might also have some sensibility of hooks and barriers and things that might be showing up that could get in the way of you really living fully into what matters to you in this session at this moment. If there's anything like that, maybe there's distraction, maybe there's fear of failure, maybe there's a kind of desire to get it right, learn how to do it the proper way. Maybe there's doubts about your own ability. Maybe there's any of those things. Just seeing if you can hold anything like that with an open, loving awareness. Knowing that whenever we care deeply, or let me say, it is a sign of us caring deeply that those sorts of things might arise. It's the very act of caring deeply that gives rise to those hooks and barriers. And so holding yourself in appreciation for caring, for the passionate, embodied being that you are. Just seeing if this exercise for you might crystallize into one intention, one behavior, one thing that you could do that you might hold to as a bit of a guide. Something you're taking from this as an intention for action. And in a moment, I'm going to invite you to open your eyes and come back to the group. But before we do, I just want to invite you to come back to the group with an awareness that in this room, there are a dozen people that all come with their intentions to join, to connect, to heal, And there's the possibility in this time, the creation of something new, something genuinely emergent from our work together, something genuinely good in the world. When you're ready, letting yourself reconnect with others in the group. I'd like to invite you to check in on the chat line with just a word or two, maybe a very short sentence. And if you'd be willing to share your intention, that would be great. If you'd rather not, you'd like to share some other aspect of your experience right now, you're very welcome to do that too. But I'd love to hear what bubbled up for you as an intention in this moment. Staying present, learning, compassion and authenticity. Managing my low energy level. Thank you, Julian. I really appreciate the authenticity in that. Purpose and hope, holding purpose and hope, creating connection and learning. Beautiful. A few other people in the group, would you like to share or being open? Thank you. All right, so to start with, I'd like to invite you to grab a piece of paper and a pen. Very old school, I know, but and we are going to be doing a collective matrix, but I have been thinking a lot about tech and weaving it in and so forth. And what I'd like to do is have something really low tech that you can use as your thinking space for this activity. So I'll just give you a moment to get organized with that. If you've got a piece of paper that you can draw the matrix onto, you don't need to write words or anything. You at this point, you can just do the 2 dimensions. Thanks, Joe, for your extra intention there. Thank you, Elaine. Staying open and appreciative of history, of why people cherish their position. And I'm just remembering that the people who might be watching this can't see the chat line. Joe added on psychological flexibility. Okay, everyone okay for pen and paper? You're okay? Okay. So yes, if you could draw the 2 dimensions, and if you could just, actually let's just label toward, away, inside, outside. That's all we really need for now. So there are 3 orienting questions that I like to ask at the beginning, or at least that guide my thinking about how to get into this. What are we talking about? Or another way of saying this is, who is the group, okay, that we're working with here? That's the first one. What will be the opening question? That's the second one. And how can I create an activity that encourages people to feel into the heart mind so that it's not just up in your head? Now, I have to say, I just came up with these like 35 minutes ago. So this is not, gospel or anything, but I'm just saying this is what I realized. I worked through these questions. So the first question is, who is the group that we're talking about here? And I'm going to invite you to think about the group as being the community of prosocial facilitators, okay? The broader community of prosocial facilitators, not just you, but all the people that have done the training and are still involved in the community. Just mute my phone. So this exercise is going to be about what might matter most to that community, right? Now you are part of that community, or you're becoming part of that community. And my hope is that you'll choose to be an ongoing part of the community. But for the purposes of this exercise, I thought it would be helpful for establishing this idea that what we're talking about is a new emergent entity. We're not talking about just what you personally think. We're inviting you to step into, this is a really hard thing to describe, but we're inviting you to step into what you think the community would care about, right? We're not gods. We can't know what other people care about, really. So we're still projecting from the space of what we think, but we're projecting, what do I think the community will care about, okay, and be concerned about? So that's the group I'm inviting us to do this exercise around. It goes beyond just the course. It's the ongoing community. So I will say to you, I'm in the midst of writing a grant application right now, which will dramatically accelerate the tech that we can support and the other forms of support that we can use to support community. We are looking to create a global ecosystem of facilitators, an ecosystem of researchers, and an ecosystem of partners and that have need for greater cooperation. And we're trying to create that whole ecosystem, facilitators, researchers, and partners. So this one bit that we're talking about here is the ecosystem of facilitators. I just want to make sure that I've been clear there. It may be that you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm not going to be part of that. You know, I'm just here to learn Prosocial and then I probably won't have much to do with it. That's fine. A little bit sad, to be honest, because I'd love it if you weren't thinking that. And I think by the end of the course, you might not be thinking that. But right now, even if that's what you're thinking, I'm going to invite you to do some work on behalf of that community from where you live. Make sense? Okay. The second key thing is, what is the opening question? I have decided to make the opening question here, what matters most to us as a community? I might just screen share for a bit, would be the easiest thing. So yes, this is on the Miro board, but we don't need to go there yet. What matters most to us as a community, including what overarching aims should guide us, and if we had just one or two values we needed to hold in mind as key elements of our culture, what should they be? Now, I almost always do a different question here, but it's always some variant. I could have just stopped at what matters most to us as a community and then elaborated these other things. But I wanted to be crystal clear that when I'm inviting you to think about these things, it could be that you've got in mind somewhere we want to get to, that is an aim, or it could be that you've got in mind more something like, this is how I want the community to function. This is the culture I want the community to have. And I wanted to make it clear that from my perspective, both of those kinds of responses are helpful for guiding our mission and our culture. And both of those things are important. Is that clear? Would anyone like to clarify anything about that question? So I don't know if you need to write it down on your sheet or whether you, once I lock these things, it's a bit of a fiddle to unlock them, and I can't copy the text out into the chat line, but suffice to say, what matters most to us as a community, and then its aims and values for culture. Okay. But it doesn't have to be all of those things. It's just what shows up for you. I wanted to make space rather than say you've got to do this long list. My third question, first one was, who's the group? Second one was, how are we going to get started? The third one is related to that, is how can I create some sense of feeling into the heart mind so that it's not just a cognitive activity? All right, and so that's what we're going to do now. So I'm going to invite you to switch modes again. Instead of being a trainee facilitator and paying attention to my process, I'm going to invite you to step back into being a participant when you're ready. And so if you'd be willing to just take a moment to pop down pens and pencils and keyboards and bring your attention back into your body. You don't need to close your eyes unless you wish to. That may help you to focus. I'm going to invite you to move into a contemplation of communities that you've seen work really, really well. Communities of love and support and productivity. Letting your mind go to experiences of that you might have had in your life. And almost certainly, as your mind goes in that direction, it will also encounter communities that have been horrible and have not worked. And that's okay too. That, like in our opening exercise, that's part of connecting with what we care about. But in this space, I want to invite you to imagine it's, let's say, 1 or 2 years down the track. And you're taking stock. You've decided to look at what's going on in the prosocial community. And the community has grown. It's thriving. There's this real sense of support for one another. There's a real sense of safety. There's a real sense of learning, mutual learning. There's a sense of doing good in the world. Whatever healthy, thriving prosocial community looks like for you, remembering here that we're talking about the community of facilitators that we have built together. I just want to let you take a moment to settle into not only what you're seeing, what does this group look like? What are they doing? How are they being with one another? But also how that feels in your body as you bring to heart and mind this sense of the possibility of great connection, great purpose, great achievement of purpose, productivity, efficiency, even learning, support, safety, whatever it is. What shows up for you as critically important? What would you be seeing, and how does that affect you? And from that space, I'd like to invite you to reconnect with the group. I notice there's a couple of people that have joined us. Welcome, Joseph and Becky. We are working, first of all, on a piece of paper, and we've been through who the group is. The group that we're talking about is the group of prosocial facilitators. So it's the community of facilitators that we're seeking to create beyond the term of this course, including this course, but beyond the term. And so the invitation was, even whether you see yourself as part of that community or not, to imagine into the needs and what might matter to that community. And not just to imagine it cognitively, but to feel into the heart of what might be possible. So on the piece of paper, we have a cross with toward and away and inside and outside. And I mentioned that this is a collective matrix. So this is your personal thinking space for getting your point of view, but it's about the group. Okay, so let's just be really clear that that's what we're talking about. So what I'm really inviting you to do is to shift from what matters to me to what will matter for this group. What would this group call for? While still, and I'm still learning the language for how to describe this, but hopefully you can get the feel. What I was saying before, that if we do that in an abstracted way, it becomes like a strategic planning exercise. I'm trying to do it in the way that builds from what you are passionate about and you're noticing. What is your piece that you're bringing to contribute to an understanding of what the group needs? Do you see what I'm trying to do? We can only ever be ourselves. We can only ever be our own passionate being. And also we can step into us and we. So it's that move that I'm inviting. So take a moment to jot down in the first top right quadrant what you think might matter most to us as a community. And I'm just going to make a bit of additional instruction here. We're really going for quality, not quantity. So don't feel as though you have to write a lot on this piece of paper in front of you. The key thing is to really feel into what's true for you. And you'll recall that I broke out that question of what matters most in a couple of different ways. One was around what is the community about, what's its overarching aim, but also what qualities of behaviour does it embody, what's its culture. And just take a moment to rest in a contemplation of that and to maybe jot down 2 or 3 biggest things. I mean, you can do more if you want. Maybe just taking another minute or so. In this exercise, you'll continue to be able to add. It's just a little slice of time, the things that are showing up for you. And then shortly we'll be building something together. So I'm just wondering if we're ready to move on. If you could maybe give a thumbs up reaction if you are. And yep. Still a few people working, I think. Hey, Gary, welcome.
I got some new lunch. Alright, ready to go. So we moving soon. Yeah. So when does that happen?
Just muted you there, Gary, but very welcome. I don't know if you can hear us. So I'm going to invite you now to move to contemplation of a different question. I think you know where we're going here, but others may not. So if you hold some of that intention that you explored in the first question, maybe it was an overarching aim, maybe it was a couple of elements of culture that were particularly important for you. If our group, that's community, this prosocial community of facilitators that we're building, if we were really living in line with those values, what would be something that, or aims or values, what would we be doing? What are some of the sort of key things that we might see as expressions of those intentions? Just taking a moment to contemplate that and to consider, just jot down one or two or three things in that bottom right part of your piece of paper in front of you, the toward, outer expression, the behavioural expression. And remember as best you can to check, could a video camera see people doing this? If not, then what would a video camera see if people were embodying this? Just going to say welcome, Gary. Great to see you. And you're still on mute. Hi there.
I have Mark Betancourt with me.
Ah, wonderful. G'day, Mark.
G'day.
Gary, I just want to share with you and anyone else who hadn't heard this, that this recording may well be shared with others in the future. And so if you prefer to not be seen, then you're welcome to turn your video off. But if you're okay with showing your video, I'd certainly love to have your faces so that I can see your reactions and so on. But
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Mark came all the way from DC to visit me, and he's worked with me and David for quite a while on a lot of the projects we did. So he's here, so he's going to sit in for a minute.
Lovely. Very welcome, Mark. So Gary, we were working on a piece of paper in front of us, and the community is the potential prosocial facilitator community that is growing. Sorry, the group that we're talking about is the community of facilitators beyond this course. The question in the top right was what matters most to this community? And the question in this quadrant is, what would we be doing if we were embodying what matters most? And we're inviting you just to write down one or two things in each quadrant so that you can get clear in your own mind before we start sharing what matters. Now, if you're jumping ahead and you'd like to go to the left-hand side, that's fine. If not, that's fine too. I'll give you another minute or so in this quadrant. We're just generating ideas at this point. When you're ready to move on, just let me know in the chat line, perhaps just say ready or something like that. Okay. I think we might have everyone there. Is that right? Anyone not ready? I may have miscounted. Oh, it looks like Roberto, are you okay? Okay, wonderful.
Well, for whatever reason, I'm not able to make my chat work, so don't look for responses from me on the chat.
Okay. You have made it work. There's a response from
Right?
you there. Yeah.
Oh, is there? Okay, good.
You're doing much better than you thought. Thanks, Kathleen. And thanks, everyone. All right. So when we imagine doing that stuff, when we imagine really fully embodying those things over on the right-hand side, what sorts of things show up that might hook you or others? It's remembering this as a collective. What might hook us in the community and stop us really embodying and living in line with those values? So stop us doing what's down there in the second quadrant. It might be, concerns about failing. It might be other priorities. It might be concerns about safety, whatever it is. what's showing up for me right now is this, you know, you're probably drawing upon past experience of communities that have gone wrong. That's a helpful thing. You know, what kinds of, if you step into the shoes of the people that were associated with that going wrong, what might have been happening for them that got in the way. It might also come from a more personal space of, you know, just noticing what my fear is for this community and believing that that may be a shared fear or concern. And again, we don't need lots. The point is not quantity, but quality. What are the most important things that show up for you here? And I'm going to invite you to kind of seamlessly move to this bottom left as well. What does this have people doing when those sorts of internal behaviors show up? What does it have them doing? I mean, you could have gone the other way. You could kind of notice what dysfunctional things happen in community. It's not just dysfunction here. It's stuff that's about self-protection. What happens when people self-protect or act out of self-interest in groups? And what do they do? What's visible, including yourself? And then you can go back up to that top left and kind of have a feel into, what might be driving that? There's a loop here on this side. We're looking for a relationship between an internal way of seeing the world and the behaviors that show up. Okay, are we ready to move on, or you want some more time? A couple of people still going. The next thing I'm going to ask you to do, we're going to leave the sort of fifth quadrant, always feels weird saying that, but the fifth question until we've got some things on the board. What I invite you to do is to look back over what you've written and just see if anything's emerging for you as kind of really fundamental, and circle that. Might be one thing, it might be more than one thing. And this is just a moment in time, right? This is what is showing up for you right now as most important. It's not the right answer. It's not, so please don't get stuck in sort of, I've got to get this right in some way or other. This is just what's showing up for you as most important here and now. And that's what I'm going to invite you to map together so that we're really kind of honing in on some key things rather than, you know, getting too divergent. Just going back and having a look at the map, seeing if it holds together, if there's anything that you need to add, or if there's some kind of completeness there for what you've got. Remembering this is just your perspective. We haven't yet done the collective work. And in terms of timing, I just want to repeat for those who've showed up late or came after the start, that I have allowed until the half hour for my time. And I realise that for some of you, you may feel you need to get off before then. And all I can say is there'll be the recording for you to check back in on. And you can add your material to the board as well, because it'll be publicly available. Well, it'll be available to you, not to everyone. Okay, I just want to pause and check anyone who would like more time at this point. Just pop your hand up to say, look, I just need a bit more thinking time. Okay. So I just put in the chat line the link to the Miro board. So here's our transition moment. And if it's the case that this causes challenges, I think the way that we do this, I will be able to add your notes to the board with a group this size if you put them in the chat. However, I'd much prefer it if you could put them in directly. And so what we've done so far, just to reorient, and apologies if this is a bit too repetitious, but I really want to make sure we're all on the same page. What we've done so far is we've quite deliberately stepped into our own view okay, so Becky's just direct messaged me and I'm just going to respond to that. So Becky's asked the question, are we shaping this for our entire group? How will we reflect this to everyone not here and invite their feedback and or ideas? Good question. Thank you, Becky. So my intention here is primarily, the intention set at the beginning was primarily to demonstrate a complete administration of the matrix. But once we've got this thing, yes, we should definitely look at how we can involve others in adding to this thing. But that's not my primary intention right in this moment. My primary intention is just to hold the group of people that are here and to provide a model of what we're doing together. That sound okay? All right, thank you. And so what I'd like you to put onto the matrix, and you can put in all 4 quadrants, is maybe your expression of the most important thing for you. If it's a couple of things, that's okay. But again, I'm going for richness rather than quantity here, heart rather than, you know, your ability to generate heaps and heaps of ideas. And as you put these things up, look to see what else is there and maybe group them a little bit just by moving them. If you see someone else has already written what you wanted to say, you don't need to say it. Okay? We're now moving into a collective product. These things are not associated with names. They're just there as a shared thing. And you'd have an opportunity as we go forward to vote on what you think is most important, so you can still have your input. What we want is a succinct, somewhat grouped set of ideas that we can now then look at in the aggregate. That's what we're trying to create together. So to reiterate, we're really not going for, you know, please don't put more than, say, 3 at the most on here, and they need to matter to you, okay? I mean 3 in each quadrant. You can put at least 1 in each quadrant, if that makes sense. Oh, and I forgot to bring you all to me. If you don't know where I am on the board, I just brought you all to me. Karen, thank you for that beautiful suggestion. Karen's just suggested that I share the board in real time so that for the video, which is a beautiful suggestion, talk about thinking about the collective. Thank you. Really appreciate that. So that means I can't see you quite as well, but others can see what's emerging here, which is really going to be helpful. Thank you. And please feel free, if you're messaging me, to message the whole group if you think it's appropriate, just so we all can see. You can start moving things around a little bit just to put them together. Remembering you only need to add things that are new. If you'd like to express something just in a slightly different way, by all means, write a new post-it note and just put it near something that's already there.
So one of the challenges is just that with so many people on the board is moving really slowly. So to be able to see everyone and give our feedback, it's like there's a delay. So just being aware.
Yeah, I can see that, Kim. That's a great point. All right, well, let's just let things fall as they may, and then we can organize from there. Does that sound, that's going to work for you? Yeah. Just really appreciating the, in line with what Kim said, I really only had a space to process the top right quadrant, and validated and diverse rituals, obviously learning together, collaborating together, but a lot of support, a lot of empowerment. So really embodiment of the principles. I'm sure we could, in empowered choice, embodying CDP3, I'm pretty sure we could, practicing what we preach. So if you've managed to put yours out, I'd invite you to begin to kind of process what's there, feel into whether there's something that's unsaid and needs to be added, or whether there's ways that maybe those points could be grouped a little bit, similar things brought together. You see, we're creating something new, something emergent, which is not just your own expression. You too can contribute right here and now to what's this shared product that we're creating? How do I best honor other people's contributions right here and now? How can I act in community right here and now? So we want to see if we can maybe just summarize what is showing up here right now. Come to a shared space. You're welcome to keep acting on it, but if you can come to a kind of attention with me, I'd appreciate that. So I want to bring your attention first of all to what we've created together in this values quadrant, if you like, the toward, inner, what matters to us quadrant. Got a big cluster there of support, taking care, true collaboration that builds in support. We've got something around, well, there's learning, but there's also, I think, sustainability, social and environmental justice, you know, moving in the direction of the content and supported by the ways we are together, the rituals that support that, and providing accessibility to people. So that it's, you know, there's diversity and equity and inclusion, I imagine. And then over here we have really making a difference, making sure that we're practical. Practicing what we preach. Transparency, openness, playfulness is important. I'm not sure what reciprocity of energy output means, but maybe the person who put that might just clarify that a little, or come online and unmute and share what that meant.
Yes, Paul, in my mind, reciprocity of energy has to do with putting out X amount of energy to teach, to facilitate, and somehow this returns back to me, whether it's through being paid, through ongoing opportunities, through referrals, etc.
Yes, got it. Okay, well, that's exactly. So it's really CDP2, isn't it? You're sort of, and I guess we could have done that in this way. We could have, but I didn't want to channel it too much. But yeah, you're saying what we need is reciprocity here in the group. to support ongoing energy expenditure. All right, love it. I think Karen has been summarising some of these major themes in a thing up the top there. Karen, is that right? Yeah. Thank you. Lovely. All right, so we can come back to that, and obviously we can work with it in more depth. But just to get a feel of the map, because I'm going to ask you this psychological flexibility question in a moment, and to get there, we need to sort of get a feel for how the whole thing works together. And so if we were really embodying those different values, some of the things that we'd be doing would be organizing into small groups. We'd be, listening to one another. We'd be and giving honest feedback. Values-based living, practices of values-based living, that might need to be a little bit clearer with that in terms of what that looks like. Some of the other things we'd be doing is including the voice of the planet and ancestral lines of Indigenous knowledge. We'd be playing games, we'd be moving, we'd be credentialing, okay. Obviously actually doing the business of support. Just can't quite see that behind. Yeah, we'd be applying prosocial in the world and sharing our understanding of it. And we'd be sharing good practices amongst ourselves, collaborating, engaging in a community of practice. So community of practice and fostering that. Anything I've missed there? Does anyone want to pipe up and say, is there something? So, and part of that community is being generous, like generously sharing our resources. Have I missed anything in either of those two quadrants that was important that I should have voiced?
Paul, I would like to suggest that we add to the summarize this to support each other in a more personal way. I think it's very important because when you're working with groups and in a specific situation, sometimes things get tough. And as it happened in several conversations, it's very nice to see that someone is listening to you as a person.
Yes.
Being a facilitator, it's sometimes you need kind words.
Yeah.
So supporting each other.
Yeah, and if we think about how the community could create that, we might have buddies, or we might have a reminder to support, opportunities for that one-to-one type support. Is that what you're after there, Roberto?
Yes, one-to-one and as a community. We're doing this from the point of view we are a community facilitators.
Yeah.
So as a community, we can really care for the rest of the group.
Yeah, love it. Yeah, thank you so much for that addition. I appreciate it greatly. Kathleen, I see you've got your hand up, and then we'll move.
Well, this may be my value, but I feel strongly that for me, what I think the whole group also needs, the worldwide ecosystem of prosocial facilitators needs to be talking about the worldview and be more specific about this. Just isn't helping groups be cooperative. This is about the superorganism. There is a way that we're evolving as a community. For me, the idealistic part of me feels like there has to be a place to express these, to me, that's an overarching principle, that there's the potential in this work to to scale up to the larger organism.
Yeah.
And I don't see that. in what we're talking about. We're still in this little mindset of we're the facilitators. And for me, there's also, you know, the big piece of helping humanity scale up.
Yeah, talking about our broad scale impact on a really, you know, significant scale, and how do we frame that? How do we message that? How do we sustain it within ourselves in the face of challenge and difficulty? So lovely. All right, thank you. Now, I just notice, actually, I'm noticing the chat, but I'm going to actually move on just to capture a bit of a sense of this top left here. First of all, well, actually, I will respond one thing to the chat. Karen's taken the initiative of summarising these things. I think that's really helpful, Karen, and I'm fine with it. It's going to make it interesting to work out how we vote on it, but that's okay. I think it's still serving a useful function. And Julian asked the question of, would there have been values in putting up duplicated ideas so we can get a sense of quantity? I think the voting process is where I'm going to get a sense of quantity. And right now, I'm just trying to get a sense of clarity and distillation, if possible. And I'm actually learning from this group, because what I noticed in the last little session was there was some people who felt overwhelmed by too many post-its. And I do think there are people that are quite divergent and people that are convergent. So anyway, this is how I'm doing it this time, and we'll see how we go. We can explore other options. So some of the stuff that might show up when, you know, being human, we've got these lofty intentions, which are not just lofty as in incredible, they are actually our deepest heart yearnings. And also, the nature of the beast is that we will therefore contact some of this stuff. You know, some of the difficulties there are challenges in terms of time or priorities in our lives. So we've got other things that we need to be doing. Actually, I wonder if maybe I'm doing too much work here. Is there somebody who might like to summarize what they're seeing in this space? If you'd like to put your hand up. Right now, I can't quite see everybody. Would anyone like to sort of summarize what they're seeing as emergent themes here in this? I love that one eye over on the left-hand side. I think that's kind of funny because that probably is what's getting in the way of most of this. It's my sense of me.
I like how it's also outside of the matrix.
It's great, isn't it? Being asked to do too much pro bono work, I guess, is a version of time. I didn't see a volunteer, so I'm going to carry on with just kind of noticing and reading out what I can see. Authoritarian attitude. What might that mean? If anyone would like to share what that might mean, you don't necessarily have to have written it,
Yes.
but what's your interpretation?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes,
sure.
it's when if we are within a group and there is conflict, if you will, and there is an authoritarian. For me, it's the same. Like I hate silos mindset, and also it may come out as an authoritarian attitude. And maybe this one goes to the fourth quadrant, but it can be from the not being able. Is like if I go to collaborate with these people or teach or facilitate or whatever, and there is this silo authoritarian mindset, I hate that. And I'm using a strong word here. Yeah.
So I get this sense that that what might show up for us internally in part is when we get stressed in conflict, we might kind of come down really, some of us might come down really heavy and be authoritarian, or might sort of get into us and them groups in some way or other. Yeah. And thank you, Lilian. That's great.
For me, another part of that is, because this is really talking in reference to individual responses that can be very collective, is unconsciously aligning with the top-down hierarchy mindset
Yeah.
and letting other people take care of things, or being passive and not really really attending to the needs of the group, but kind of getting restricted around the old power mindsets that we bring to most engagements.
Gosh, that's such an important point. I notice so often I go into situations and I just assume there's a hierarchy and I put myself in it and in a sense stop taking responsibility for my part of what is being created. Yeah, that's such a key point. Thank you. Pick up on other ones that you're seeing there, but yours or others, you know, what's jumping out at you? What sense are you making?
I'm curious about what zero-sum thinking means.
Mm-hmm. What do we think that might mean? Again, it doesn't have to be the person who wrote it. It could be your interpretation. I think it might be related to that ego and competition. I think that's why it's been put there, that it's like if I get this prosocial job, then you can't have, or if you get it, I won't be able to have it. Or if I share my materials, then you know, I'm going to lose. Something like that. Is that, have I captured the essence of that? But one of the people who wrote that, maybe.
Yeah. Like if you're playing a game, you know, one team's going to win, one team's going to lose. You know, there's not a win-win. It's win-lose. That's zero-sum thinking.
Yeah.
And that would be very to the group working together.
So we could go further with that, but I am going to need to move on. And so when we get in the midst of, thank you, Joe, that's great to clarify that. There are other things there that are important and you've put up, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move on and just get to a place. When we get really hooked by those things, we don't show up, we stop acting, we avoid conflict or don't name conflict, we gossip to one another, we're short and rude with one another, you know, or we rely too much on authority, you know, and you could probably track, if we had a bit more time, you could kind of track from these overarching themes, what's the dominant response when each one of those shows up? And that would be a really useful exercise, because really what you're trying to do here is to get a sense of how these things spiral. How do these things get sustained as being short-term reinforcing, but long-term they're really damaging us, you know? But they're sustained even though they're unhelpful. Well, what's doing that? It's usually a loop of sort of short-term reinforcement, you know, that it feels good in the short term and that drives even more maladaptive behavior and so forth. So we could take a deep dive into that, but I think we've got enough there for now. I do want to just connect with this question here of psychological flexibility, and you haven't had a chance to think about that. But if you put yourselves into this mind of the collective where these kinds of things can show up, challenges with time and priorities, authoritarian attitude, getting stuck in that, or maybe us and them, unconsciously aligning with that authoritarian mindset and using power in different ways that are not helpful, or scarcity, ego and competition. How can we hold, what's important for us in terms of holding that, the potential for that to happen, and all of these behaviors down here in the bottom left, you know, all of that could happen. So moving a bit beyond maybe, or maybe we've already got it in the support piece and quadrant 2, but is there anything else you want to add? And again, just go for the one big idea that's really important to you down here in this 5th question box. How might we hold all of that stuff on the left-hand side with awareness and compassion as a collective, while still helping us all move toward these things that really matter to us? What sorts of things could we do? Or, you know, it's not just kind of stuff that a video camera could see here. We're really looking at orientation. It could be as well. It could be stuff that a video camera could see. But how?
Paul, are you asking us to respond verbally?
Thank you. Be a bit clearer about that. I'd love to, yeah, if you like, and then I could maybe type it for you so that it's represented on there as well.
Well, I actually added one that I don't know if you can see it, about play and movement and music and animating joy in the spaces when we're together in so I feel like everywhere I go, I try to do that with the groups that I'm part of, because I think of Einstein and, you know, the different energy that the solution comes from than the old story, you know, paraphrasing, but you can't solve a problem in the same energy in which it was created. And so many of our old story meetings are wah wah, you know, they're energetic, you know, that just overdraft us. And so bringing joy and music and even in the Zoom rooms, you know, having more animation. That's at least one of the things that that I feel really passionate about.
I love that. And not only do I love that you brought that, but also that you live it so thoroughly, Becky. Thank you. And I did see that in quadrant 2, and I've just added it there to quadrant 5 as well, because it, you know, it is kind of speaking to this thing about how do we hold all that difficulty and still move. So I hope that's satisfactory, what I've written there for you. Anyone else like to speak up in this space? So accepting we're a process, transparent communication, group norms. So, you know, maybe doing something like this and you know, I guess we're in the midst of establishing group norms right now. That's what we're actually doing. Reaffirming our shared identity and purpose, acknowledging the strengths and challenges. You know, some of this is just like knowing that this is true and could happen, and reliving into this in some way or other. Accepting where a process can go, you know, really deep in terms of we are in process when we're imperfect, we're not getting this right. At least that's how I'm reading it. Correct me if I'm misinterpreting any of these.
I would like to add to that process idea is not only that we as humans are process in the making, in delivering, but the situations that we live are as well processes, and the whole idea of learning and be fit to respond to something as complex as we are trying to respond with Prosocial, we really need to accept that everything is a process and to live calmly through the process with a lot of compassion towards ourselves and to the rest of the people, because not everybody is at the same time in the process.
Okay, so Thank you. I just added to that. I'm hoping that's acceptable to you, Roberto, and if not, feel free to edit it. But I think I got that really strong sense that what we're trying to do is really hard as well. It's really complex. The world is in process. And so we need to extend ourselves some self-compassion around that as a group. I think that's what I heard. So we're in process right now, and what I would most likely do from this point would be I'd start to identify. I'd be working right now to elaborate on kind of a mission statement and a culture statement would be one thing. So I'd wanting to be used to work with the group to build this into something usable, something that we can remember. And so that would be a distillation process. So I'd be inviting in this conversation, and I'm loving Karen's contribution here with this. I'm just not sure how to vote on it. We would do some sort of voting process on the sticky notes, perhaps, or you know, ask people to think about it and come back. I'm conscious of the time, so we're not going to be able to do this in this session. However, that's where I'd go with that. And then what I would do is I would, and this bit we can do, I'm wondering if there's a subgroup of people that for the purposes of this learning activity might be willing to just go away and see if you can distill a kind of mission statement, at least the beginnings of it, and a kind of, it's quite a lot to ask, isn't it? A kind of culture statement. Maybe there's a subgroup that might be willing to do the mission statement of Prosocial World is consciously evolving a world that works for all. So maybe that captures what we've got here. I'd be really interested if there was a subgroup of people that wanted to sort of capture the values piece, the culture piece that you're seeing emerging. What kind of culture are we trying to create? So that would be one activity. Is there anyone who might be willing to do that from this work? Kathleen is putting her hand up.
Well,
No.
I'm willing to participate in the group, but
Yeah.
I'm actually wanting a little bit more clarification.
Sure. Yeah.
In terms of the identity, this is the ecosystem of facilitators. So is it the culture of the ecosystem of prosocial facilitators or the larger culture of prosocial, which includes the researchers? And
nice. Thank you.
You know, it's bigger than just the facilitators.
That is so key, isn't it? And I glossed over it because I brought in the whole box and dice and said that's our mission, and it's not. You're right. The mission of the I explained at the beginning that we're trying as a whole to build an ecosystem of facilitators and an ecosystem of researchers and an ecosystem of partners and collaborators in the world that are trying to you know, that are doing real work and need help with collaboration, as it were. And that might be business as well as, you know, not-for-profits and so forth. So, and Kathleen has just absolutely helped to clarify that we're actually talking about the community of facilitators here. I did go to some links to identify that at the beginning. So it would be a kind of draft, early version of a mission statement and a set of cultural guidelines, if you like, or principles. We've got our core design principles. We could just plug those in, but in a way, what we want to do is try and come to something that lives in real language here, at least among this group. And this is a not unusual situation that not everyone's in the group, but this is unusual in the sense that you're only a small part of this group. And so we're obviously speaking sort of on behalf of a much larger group, and others may disagree, but we've got to start somewhere. So I'm wondering if anyone is interested in puzzling about that as an activity for going forward, to puzzle about, you know, those two pieces of what could be a possible mission statement for the facilitator community and what could be a, you know, for want of a better term, value statement or cultural statement. People have different language around that, or guidelines or principles or whatever. If there's anybody with interest in that, please do email me. If I don't hear from anyone, then I'll know that wasn't an attractive proposition. But that's where I would be going with a group that that was trying to orient around what we've just created here. Of course, the other way I'd be going is seeking to prioritize actions. And then that's where we're going in the rest of the course, is to kind of take these action steps here that we've articulated and these ones here, which are all behaviors as well. So everything in 2 and 5 is now content that we can use in refining a set of action goals, a set of ways forward, okay? And 5, by virtue of working on 5, we're going to be using the whole of the matrix, because you can't answer 5 without. So it's not like we're just discarding this left-hand side. There's nothing more that happens with it. This is being involved in the goal setting. And at some point, we would need to come back and cycle around and say, you know what, of the things that we've prioritized, are they really going to help us deal with this self-protective side, with the self, you know, where people get stuck in self-interest? Do you see what I'm going there? That it's like this is whole of matrix activity, okay? That's the way I would take it forward from here. We've done almost all of it in this time of 90 minutes. The one bit that I would not include in this, that I would have like to have got to in this session, is to get agreement about a subgroup that could take forward, you know, refining this into mission and values. The goal setting piece I would usually put into a separate conversation. Okay, so that's it. We're at time. I'm just going to stop sharing, and I'd love to, as we wrap up, if we could just get maybe do a fairly quick round. It's going to need to be quick so we don't hold people for too long. But I would also like to hear from folks. If you could share something, 1 sentence maximum, of something you're let me just think about this. What's the question I want to ask? I think just the question of how are you leaving the session? What's present for you right now? And we can continue to communicate on the community space. I'll share the recording, and you can maybe communicate if there was key learnings for you or key questions that were emerging. But right now, if you could just share in a short way something, and you can unmute and say it if you like. I'm appreciating people putting it on the chat because that's very quick. But if you want to say it, feel free.
I love the collaborative process and being able to come together and shape what is emerging. Yeah, lovely. It gives me joy. It really does. And to have someone like yourself, Liliane, just contributing there and you know, new things, which I'm seeing, and that's true for all of you. Thank you so much.
And I'm aware of the macro process that this happens within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're seeing the rest of the pieces of Prosocial as being key or something larger even than that. Is that what you're saying, George?
And it's the primacy of the bigger context within which we're doing this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
And for me, it's about working with an actual group instead of just reading about the process.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, seeing it hands-on, Gary, that's so important, isn't it? Yes. And thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting.
Yeah. And some of the things that are showing up in the chat, just for the recording, people willing to join the group, Liliane and Kathleen and Kim, oh gosh, and Julian, oh, I'm glad I went back. Wow, okay, so to help me, could you just, could one of you email me those 4 names? Would be really cool. I'm going to nominate Julian because he's first. Julian, could you just email me those 4 names? Becky's grateful for the time together as a bonus. Julian's excited to witness cultural evolution in real time. Inspired, Karen. Energized by considering actual in the moment challenges. Yeah, love it. Feeling more prepared for future engagements. Better sense of the flow of the matrix. Curious about the whole process. Being aware of the whole board. Love it. Love the rainbow colors of the post-its. No one would confuse this for work. Excellent and thankful for being able to participate and witness such a rich group of hearts and minds. Thank you, Paul, for your generosity. Yes, thanks, Paul, for offering this. And we should establish more intentional expectations. It should have supportive, but also have standards and expectations of members. Wonderful. Just thank you very much. And I look forward to the remainder of the course with you all. And we'll put this one in the can and we'll keep on talking about it going forward. And I will be in touch with those 4 and we'll work out what are we going to do with this going forward. To speak to Becky's question, let's not, just treat this as a practice exercise. Let's actually turn it into something. So my heart is full. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful people.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Paul, and everybody.
Thanks.